We're gonna get this thing started here. Mike's not listening to me.
Good evening. Members of council are assembled. It is 6:30 when you're ready to begin.
Thank you very much, Don. I'd like to call to order this meeting of Saugeen Shores Council with regard to planning matters, and say good evening to all members of council and everybody in the chambers and everyone watching us via the live stream. Glad everybody's here. Second item on the agenda is the land acknowledgement, and I'll read that. We acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which consists of the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash unceded First Nation. We understand this land holds immense significance to the people of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. We appreciate those who live and work alongside us today and who continue the traditions of their ancestors as stewards of the land we are privileged to inhabit. We thank them for the contributions they have made in both caring for the land and in shaping this community. We commit to truth and reconciliation, to acknowledging the truth about what happened to Indigenous peoples because of colonization, and to reconciliation, which begins with each and every one of us. As a local government and public organization, we are dedicated to learning about Indigenous culture, to fostering a better relationship with First Nations and their people, and we commit ourselves to actions that move us forward on a path to healing along with the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. Third item on the agenda is disclosure to pecuniary interest. Any member have one of those they'd like to declare at this time? Seeing none, of course, you can do so anytime if you need to. We have no additions, deletions, or amendments, and no minutes to adopt. So we're all the way down to public meetings, and we have two public meetings this evening. So we'll start with the first one, and next on the agenda, here we go. I'm gonna open my agenda. So next on the agenda is a public meeting for zoning bylaw amendment Z 2024-054 for Ray, and it's a public meeting under the Planning Act. The meeting on this file is now open. The purpose of the public meeting is to learn about the application and to hear from members of the public. First, we will receive a report from planning staff, then we will hear from the applicant or their agents, and then we will hear from any members of the public. Members of the public are advised that the ability to appeal the decision on this application may be limited if you have not provided comments on the application before the decision is made. Comments may be made verbally before the committee or submitted to staff in writing before the bylaw is passed. After we've heard from the public, the committee will discuss and consider a recommendation on this application. So I'll now ask the planner on the file to present the application. Oh, and Ms. Stieber is online. Go ahead.
Thank you. The purpose of the application this evening is to seek a site-specific provision to the highway commercial zone. The rezoning would recognize a reduced rear yard setback, an increased exterior side yard setback, a reduced landscape open space located in the front yard, and reduced parking setback from the street. And concession 6 shall be considered the front lot line. The rezoning would also identify that certain provisions relating to accessory dwelling units shall not apply. If approved, the effect of the proposed amendments will facilitate the development of a 3-story 16 residential unit and commercial mixed-use building on the subject lands. The property is located at 5094 Highway 21 at the northeast corner of Concession 6 and Highway 21. The site is surrounded by a mix of commercial and residential uses on all sides of the property. Bruce County Chiropractic and Rehabilitation Center is located directly adjacent to the north. The Saugeen Acres borders the rear of the property, and the Sunny Motel is across the road, Concession 6. A residential apartment building is located on the opposite side of Highway 21. The Bruce County official plan designates the subject lands primary urban communities. The town of Saugeen Shores official plan designates the lands highway commercial. The goals and objectives of both the county and local official plans direct much of the future growth to primary urban communities such as Port Elgin to support the efficient use of land and infrastructure. Currently, 2 commercial buildings containing an auto detailing business are on site. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing buildings and to construct a 3-story mixed-use building with commercial on the main level and 16 residential apartment units on the 2nd and 3rd floors. The site has immediate access to Concession 6 and Highway 21 and will connect to existing municipal services. The proposal supports the efficient use of land and infrastructure. Through an amendment to the town's official plan in 2024, medium and high density residential uses are now permitted in the highway commercial designation, provided those residential units are accessory to a commercial use. The uses are compatible and off-street parking is provided. The proposal includes commercial on the main floor with the residential units on the upper floors. The size and number of units on the commercial ground floor have yet to be determined by the applicant. The existing lot frontage and area on this property are considered suitable for the scale of the development proposed. For a corner lot, the shorter lot line abutting a street is deemed to be the front lot line, and the longer lot line abutting a street is deemed to be the exterior side lot line. The site has 49-meter frontage on both roads. For the purpose of interpretation, the applicant is seeking to identify the property line adjacent to concession 6 as the front lot line. Staff have considered this reasonable to allow. It is not anticipated allowing for a reduced minimum rear yard would result in any impacts to surrounding properties to use the property for permitted uses. And the intent is being maintained. The applicant is requesting relief relating to the separation from the parking area to the street line. The application is proposing 2 meters, whereas the required setback is 3 meters. The applicant is meeting or exceeding the minimum 3-meter setback along most of Highway 21. The reduced setback is relating to the southwest corner of the property in the area of the site visibility triangle that forms part of the road allowance. The purpose and intent of the setback is to ensure clear visibility and reduce risks or conflicts between vehicles. The purpose and the intent of the setback is being maintained and is reasonable in nature to allow. The zoning bylaw allows a maximum exterior side yard of 20 meters, whereas the applicant is proposing 27 meters. Exceeding the side yard setback adjacent to highway traffic is considered desirable, particularly with the mix of residential and commercial uses proposed. As previously stated, the subject property has 2 frontages along Highway 21 and Concession 6. The applicant is proposing Concession 6 to be the front of the property. The applicant has requested relief in order to accommodate the entrance and parking spaces and is proposing 4%. The zoning bylaw requires 30% of the landscaped open space, and the applicant is proposing 34%. 14% of the landscaped open space is proposed to be located along Highway 21. Given most of the traffic volume occurs along the Highway 21, staff find it reasonable to allow. The development is exceeding the landscape open space requirements for the site overall. The purpose and the intent of the landscape open space is being achieved through the proposal. Regarding parking, the applicant is proposing 16 spaces for the residential units with 2 visitor parking spaces. The commercial use has not been determined, but the proposal allows for 25 parking spaces. The subject property is more than large enough to accommodate the required vehicular and bicycle parking for both commercial and residential development components of the proposal. No comments of concern were received from agency or the public. This concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the report. Next, we're going to hear from members of the public, and we'll begin with the applicant or their agent. I see the agent for the applicant coming up. Introduce yourself, sir, and go ahead when you're ready.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Ron Davidson. I'm a planning consultant, and I'm representing Brandon Ray, who is the owner of the property. This proposal, as you've heard, involves commercial uses on the main floor of this new development, and then 2 floors of residential units above in the form of rental apartments. The main purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is to allow for the 2 floors of apartments, which, as you know, is badly needed in Port Elgin. 16 units, apartment units are being proposed. Right now, the zoning bylaw for Saugeen Shores only permits 1 commercial unit in the highway commercial, permits 1 residential unit in a commercial building on the 2nd floor. And it's my understanding, though, that the town was hoping to change the bylaw at some point to allow for and encourage actually more than 1 residential unit in a commercial building without having to go through the zoning bylaw amendment process, but that hasn't happened yet. I will say this, though, that the official plan for the town does allow for apartment units and more than 1, so this clearly conforms with the official plan. In addition to asking for permission to put in more than one apartment unit in a commercial building, we've also asked for some relief, and Julia has done a good job in going over that. Typically, we would handle that relief through a minor variance application, but since we're going through the zoning bylaw amendment process anyways, we added it to our zoning bylaw amendment request. Julie has done a thorough job in explaining the proposed reductions and explained the merit of it, so I won't repeat any of that, other than to touch very quickly on the open space aspect of it. I know council, because I've stood before you many times, and I've heard you say before, you very open space is near and dear to your heart. So on that note, just to make it clear, the zoning bylaw requires 30%, and we're proposing 34. It's a corner lot, as you heard, and the concession 6 is considered to be the front lot line. So we're expected to have 15% of the landscaping along there. We thought it was a better idea to have the 15% or most of the landscaping along Goddard Street, because that's what you see when you drive into Port Elgin, unless you're coming along concession 6, with which most people are not. So I think that aspect of the proposal makes a whole lot of sense. And I think most people would agree with me on that. The last thing I'll say is just overall, it's a good development. If you've seen the site and you can picture it not there, and you can see what we've proposed, you'll probably realize quite quickly that this is going to look quite nice for the site. It'll also be quite nice for the entrance, the southern entrance way to Port Elgin. It'll be, yeah, it'll certainly help the cause. That's it for my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So is there anyone else from the public here to speak in support of the application or with questions, concerns, or objections to the application? I don't see anybody jumping up in the room. Is there anybody online looking to speak to us? No, the clerk says there is not. Are there any written submissions that were not already discussed in the planning report presentation or oral submissions?
No, sir.
Looks like that's a no. So let's just ask one more time if anybody in the room wishes to speak to the application. Any members of the public? Okay, so that looks like it's a no. So now, before we close the public meeting, we'll ask if any committee members have final questions on the application before we close the public meeting to discuss the recommendation, the deputy mayor and then the vice deputy mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. And through you, I just want to clarify because it's a little confusing. So one of the drawings in the report, it shows on the drawing 21 unit building. And then it's described later on a certain number of residential units or accessory residential units, and then that the commercial space is not defined yet. So then when you go on to parking, it was mentioned a certain number of parking spaces, but then again, in the site plan comments in the report, it talks about 25 spaces for the commercial part, 16 for residential, 2 for visitor, and 2 accessible. That adds up to a pretty big number of parking spaces. What actually is, what are the numbers? And I appreciate the comment that the commercial space isn't defined yet, but the drawing does say 21 unit building, but then it talks about 16 residential units. And, you know, there's quite a few parking spaces noted, but I just wondered what is the actual number given the list that's there?
Sure, we can get that answer.
Thank you.
Does the planner wish to speak to it, or do you want me to have the agent for the applicant speak to it? The plan, we'll go to the planner first.
I can. You can see the number of spaces delineated out there on the matrix on the side of the site plan. It'll show that there is 16 spaces for the residential use. The 21 units that I think you're referencing in the middle is regarding the total number of units. They have 16 residential identified there with 5 commercial. So I think they're just adding it as a total of a potential number of units, but please be aware the applicant hasn't decided the number of commercial units at this time. And so there's 16 spaces for each one space for each unit. There's 25 spaces for the commercial. And now commercial is typically defined by use. In this case, they have done the analysis based off an office use, which is one space per 40 square meters. And so they're meeting that. Two additional spaces will need to be provided for visitor parking for the residential use, which is being provided. And now 2 spaces need to be accessible, and they are providing that and meeting that.
Okay, just again for clarification, when you got to the end of what you said, Julie, I get the 16 spots for the residential units. My understanding would be, though, that associated with the residential use, there are 2 additional required spots for visitors associated with that use. And the accessible spaces, are they in addition to the 16 or are they part of the 16? I think they usually are in addition to what's defined as the resident. So I'm just, I was following along, and then when you got to the end, I just wasn't too clear if the 2 for visitors and 2 for accessibility, are they in addition or are they included in some of the numbers you said initially?
Perhaps Ron may be able to speak to that. I believe it's in addition.
Is that clear? We get the agent for the applicant. Can you speak to it, Mr. Davidson?
Sure, I can do this justice because I don't have the bylaw in front of me, but I believe it's not in addition. I think it's included as part of the number, but maybe. Good, Candace.
We'll ask Candace Ham.
Sure. So what's showing on the site plan, the required total number of parking spaces is 45 based on the commercial space that's proposed. So there's 25 spaces for commercial. There's 16 spaces for the residential component. There are 2 that are marked as accessible parking spaces. And then if you're looking at the site plan, down in the southeast corner, parking spaces 14 and 15 are marked with a V for visitor. So they are in addition to the accessible parking spaces.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much for that. That was, I was just looking for the total because there were different numbers and very significant in terms of that particular lot, because there really is no other place to park around there except for their use, except on their lot, because there is no on-street parking really in that area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the planner. I'm looking at the plan, and I just clear for me if you could, Ron, where it says proposed 3-meter wide planting strip, there's an arrow there, and then there's another white area. It says landscaped area, which is another 3 meters plus wide. And then am I seeing an existing sidewalk along Gaudry Street? So there's Gaudry Street 3-meter planting and then 3 meters of planting and then another 3 meters of planting. I'm a little confused by it says proposed 3-meter wide planting strip, but then there's a section of white entitled landscape area. So how wide is that landscape area? Is it 3 meters or 6+ meters? I'm confused by that. The way it reads.
I'm going to put that to the planner.
I think Ron will be able to speak to that.
Okay. We'll ask the agent for the applicant. Or maybe we can ask Candace Ham.
Yeah. There's several measurements on there, Mr. Mayor. I'm just a little confused about the
Candace will
measurements.
speak to it.
Yes, through you, Mayor Charbonneau. So if we're looking again at the site plan, yes, the gray shading is that 3-meter planting strip, but in the northwest corner of the site plan, there's actually a distance there and it says 6.48 meters. So what they're identifying is that we do have landscape open space along Highway 21. There's a requirement to have a 3-meter planting strip, and they're actually going to have more green space there than required.
So I'm reading that correctly, that the planting strip is over 6 meters wide.
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. So there will be landscape open space there. So There may be a difference. So at the site plan control stage, there will be a landscape plan that will identify a planting strip may include trees and shrubs. The landscape open space area may be grassed as opposed to an actual planting strip.
Understood. And at the north end, it says landscape area, and you've got proposed parking for 8 spaces for bicycle parking. Is that landscaped area also going to be landscaped or grass, or what, when we get down to that point in the planning process, what does landscaped area mean?
Again, through you, Mayor Charbonneau. I don't have the definitions in the bylaw in front of me, but it can mean a variation of different things. So it can be planting of grass, shrub, trees, and a mix, but it is defined in the bylaw what landscape open space can mean.
Thank you for that. And I'll make more comment later during our comment, but I did want to commend the planner for he has listened to us about landscape area on Highway 21. Along concession 6, and I'll make comment later about that entranceway as well. But the pathway, it says that the existing multi-use pathway, that will be a continuum then, like we need that connecting link, obviously, to Lamont Sports Park and to the Saugeen Rail Trail. So that linkage will cross that entranceway, obviously. Could be a busy little entrance, but that is what we're proposing, the extended multi-use path. Will that go right out to the stoplight? Is that the plan, is to have that multi-use path from the stoplight, Highway 21 and concession 6, right up to Saugeen Rail Trail? Is that the idea, done by the planner, done by the developer?
Who wants that one? The planner? No?
I think Candace can answer that one.
All right, Candace, back to you.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Charbonneau. The extent of off-site works haven't been discussed yet with the developer. That will happen later in the site plan control stage. If there were items that council would like to see, those can be discussed when the application is brought forward back at the site plan stage. But they are showing that, yes, they are looking to extend that multi-use asphalt trail along concession 10, at least for the frontage of the property. That's what the plan is showing here.
Okay, that's good for now. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. It was stated earlier that the majority of people will be viewing the property from the Cotteridge Street side. I happen to be one of the people that will be viewing it mostly from the concession 6 side, because I use that road just about every day as I live on that road. But I'm concerned a little bit about the section about the access to the property, and that you'll only have the access onto and out of concession 6. With all of the development that's been going on in concession 6, including the Innovation Park and the Lamont Sports Park and so on, this is going to add a bit of congestion to concession 6. So both for people coming into the site, so people will have to take a left-hand turn if they're coming south from Port Elgin, or north, they have to take a right-hand turn onto concession 6 to access the property. And likewise, when they're exiting the property, they'll be coming onto concession 6 and joining the road there. And there isn't really a defined right-hand turn lane there. So anybody going left or straight, coming down concession 6, like I might be apt to do, are going to encounter congestion, I think. And I think people, when they want to leave the property, especially the commercial users, they'll want to go back right out onto Highway 21. So to have an access point at the northwest corner, as is currently configured, would be advantageous for the movement of traffic. So that's one thing that I would like to have considered going forward when you get, and I believe if Candace could confirm, that would be part of the site planning process.
Candace?
Actually, if I may, traffic is actually something that's relevant to the current Planning Act application. So I'll ask the planner, Julie Steeper, to speak to that better.
The planner.
Thank you, Candace. Yes, I just wanted to speak a little bit about that because there's our planning documents state that entry, like exit and entry on a site should be on a lower class road. In this case, this would be concession 6. Also, assessment was conducted. The recommendations indicated that an eastbound turn lane would not be warranted on concession 6 given the forecasted total traffic volume. And so there wasn't any comments of concern regarding the proposal relating to the MTO comments either as well.
I'm not exactly sure what you mean by an eastbound turn lane off concession 6. Concession 6 comes in from the east.
Sorry, I think I must have, sorry, I have eastbound turn lane here. It is what my concluding statement is that it's sufficient for the needs of the anticipated traffic for the proposed development and that it has been considered in this case.
Well, in that regard, I do beg to differ because the distance from where the driveway will be to the intersection is a matter of feet. The driveway is essentially right at the intersection. So people coming out are going to be merging with traffic that are trying to go right or left. And the existing property has had driveways onto Highway 21, Goderich Street, and onto Concession 6 for, I'm going to say ever, but I mean, certainly since that property has been developed many, many decades. So I think even though the policy would be to lead onto a collector arterial road, Concession 6, that would be the case if it was set back to say where the trailer park is, where there's room to maneuver, but you're essentially exiting right into an intersection at that point. So I really hope that that Bruce County might consider allowing the retention of the current. And there'll be room at the other end where at the end of the parking lot, like it is now. So my second was to the planner or to the developers maybe is the style of property. I know these fellows are experienced in building properties. Is this going to be a property of similar style on the outside to what we see currently in town, say on Catherine Street or the ones on Mill Street or that sort of thing?
Have the applicant coming forward to introduce yourself, please.
Hi, Dane Butner. So yeah, it's going to be a similar style. The bottom spot is the commercial spot, so there'll be more glazing and stucco on the bottom likely. And then the top, similar to Johnson, the 12 plexes and Johnson and Mill Street. So a little, just different materials, some wood sidings, some steel, that kind of stuff.
And while I've got you there, do you have any idea on the timelines for the development? Is it too early to say, or?
We're hopeful, if all goes well, like hopefully we can start it this season in the fall, assuming everything gets passed and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you. So I got Davinsky next and then Stack and then Halpin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, I agree with Councillor Mayette on having a left turn into the area off Goderich Street. If you look at Goderich Street going south, pretty well every single business or plaza has a left turn lane that they can turn into, including the Bruce County Chiropractic. So that left lane extends, left turn lane only extends to concession 6. So why wouldn't we, or could someone answer why it was decided that we wouldn't take advantage of that left lane and move it so that traffic could flow smoothly into the development? Thank you.
Looks like the agent for the applicant will speak.
Yeah, I don't know if this helps. So there was a traffic study done for this property. Didn't have to be one. MTO was encouraging it. So we did one anyway. And it was recommending, that the entrance be exactly as shown on this site plan. I mean, quite often we're being told we need to do a traffic study to support something. We've done the traffic study. It's recommending that.
Okay, well, I beg to differ, much like
And I'm not a
Councillor
traffic
Mayette.
engineer, so.
Because it's there, it could be used. Anyway, you've answered my question and we'll get more into that as the development goes along. The other thing I had was the snow storage. The snow storage, at least two of the three areas are right by the accessible parking. I'm assuming that the snow storage is blocked off in some way, is fenced or whatever. Because if we have a winter like we had this past winter, I could see a lot of snow coming into the parking lot because there was so darn much of it. And it could affect an accessible parking space. I'm just wondering, your thoughts on that, please.
The agent for the applicant?
Yeah, sure. Good point. I mean, I don't think with any commercial development, you want to lose any parking spaces, be them for accessible people that need accessible parking or not. And in this, with a snowfall like we had this year, there's no doubt they're going to have snow removal, not just it's going to have to be removed from the site as required with dump trucks and front end loaders.
Thank you. That's good to hear, but we'll have to keep an eye on that one too, because it could be several days after and the snow could be affecting an accessible spot, or you're right, one of the regular spots as well. That's all I have for now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stack.
Thanks. I think this is probably a question for Candace. Those two accessible spots, if the applicant decides to go for universal design, are those two spots going to count towards meeting the threshold?
Candace?
Sorry, I believe the requirement for the accessible parking spaces is tied to the commercial, not the residential components.
Okay, thanks. So then is it fair to say that if they decide to go for universal design, there's no requirement to have accessible parking?
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. So with this design of having residential units on the upper floors, there would be other requirements to make those units accessible. But if there are no residential requirements for accessible parking spaces.
Okay, so sorry, I'll reframe my question. Recognizing there are no accessible parking spot requirements, they're still able to meet, are they still able to meet the universal design threshold with houses with apartments on the upper floors? That's really my question.
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. So in terms of having accessible units, sure, reframe the.
My recollection is with universal design and accessible parking accessible units aren't the same. I think my question will stem from, someone can correct me, if we have a universal design, we have the waiver, if they meet a certain threshold, do they have to get a waiver? They get the development charges waived?
Yeah, Candace can clarify that.
Yeah, so where I'm going with this is that in order to make units accessible on an upper floor, they would have to install an elevator into the structure. If they're willing to do that as part of their site design, and that they would do a minimum 20% of the units with universal design, including having an elevator to access those units, they would potentially be exempt from development charges from the residential component.
Sorry, and this is just my ignorance. So accessible, because we often have this discussion where we make a distinction between accessible and universal design. So in this instance, in order to meet the thresholds for universal design, they would have to have accessible, like they'd have to have an accessible elevator. Maybe that's the better question.
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. Without having an elevator, only ground floor units would be considered accessible. So having residential on the upper units means that by default, without having direct access through an elevator, they would not be considered accessible or meet the requirements to waive development charges.
Thank you. I think I get it now. So I know this is in the comment section, but I just want to put the comment out there. If there's any attempt to waive those development charges in any way related to this, I'm just putting it out there now. That's not something I'm going to be in favor with. And I just want to reiterate, I'm not a huge fan of the waiver of the development charges for universal design, because as I've noted every other time we've had a meeting on this, it's basically just a freebie. And I will point out, and this isn't for the developers, but something that I've raised before. We just want to be mindful. We keep building units. I'm not seeing prices decline, and I don't think that the waiver of the development charges is doing anything to address that.
Thank you. I got Councillor Halpin. Or did you?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. I was just wondering why we don't have any views of this building. Like you know, usually with these, we'll get a view of what the building is going to look like.
I don't know. Hasn't been produced yet. I don't have any comment to it from the applicant or no? No. Still in the works, not done yet, I guess. I might just, I'll just ask a question yet and then we can go back around to folks. Because the one I had was relating to the relief with regard to the exterior side yard setback, allowing, so the bylaw allows a maximum exterior side yard of 20 meters, whereas the applicant is proposing 27 meters. And I just wonder, maybe a question to and half the question to the planner and half the question to the applicant. I'd like to know why it's in the interest of the municipality to set up a situation where this site would be permanently allowing that kind of setback. Like I said, just to maybe step back a little bit, like our intent, which has been set out in the toolkits for Port Elgin, as well as our district design guidelines, has always been to move large scale buildings toward the road on the highway commercial zone. And in other words, to have parking behind the buildings and to have the buildings closer to the road. We've allowed a 20-meter setback in the zoning bylaw to begin with, which is quite big. And now we're going to extend that out to 27 meters. I think I heard Ms. Steeper say that it was in our interest. Maybe I'm not, I'll let her speak for herself. Maybe that's not what she said, but there seemed to be some indication that was something we would want to see. I don't understand that, because everything I have understood is that we want to see those buildings built closer to the road, not further away. And then the other half of the question, which would be for the applicant, is that setback necessary to facilitate development on the site? Because it would be my preference not to allow that exterior side setback to be extended and to stick to the 20 meters so that we can have these buildings built closer to the road, which is what we've always wanted for these sites. So I don't know, I put my first to the planner, maybe. Do you have a response to that?
Yes, if I may, through you, Mayor. So in this case, the increased exterior side yard setback was considered desirable because of the mixed use component of the development. Usually, typically, when we're looking at highway commercial, we're looking at large scale retail or commercial uses. In this case, we're kind of looking at a mixed use component, which would allow for like increased distance from the traffic on Highway 21. And so that's kind of, and maintaining sightlines, of course, was where staff were looking at considerations of increasing that maximum side yard setback. And so I think in this case, because of the mixed use component, is where we would look at increasing that distance.
Okay. Does the applicant have any comment? Like, is there some reason why you need 7 meters more to build on this site?
I remember having this discussion with Travis Burnside, who designed this, the engineer for Cobide, about this, and he said it would not work. I can't recall, I believe some of it had to do with parking. If we pushed we'd have to push the building far enough west towards the highway so that we get the double lane parking at the rear, if you will. But we'd have to push it so far west that it would probably be too close to the Godry Street road allowance. And also, I'm not sure if that would leave enough of a throat, if you will, or an access for the driveway getting into the parking if we push the building all that way. I think it had everything to do with parking and access to the parking area. Won't work.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying I would rather be considering a reduced side yard setback than an increased one. Because our desire has always been to have them closer to the building. So you're saying, just for clarity then, that there'd be no way to configure the parking on this site if the building was closer to the road than it's showing on this site plan?
That was my understanding. Again, if we'd have to, can't just move it over a few meters. It would have to be pushed over a considerable distance. And then it makes everything too tight on the west side.
Okay, thanks for that answer. So I got the deputy mayor next, and then we'll come back around.
Thank you. And through you, I have a couple of questions, but just to follow up on what the mayor just said, I appreciate the response that was received. I do agree with what the mayor just said, having been part of all of that process over a period of time where it's been discussed. I understand the idea that, some drawings have been made, but there are two aisles or two rows of parking on one side and one on the other. Why can't the two rows be on the east side of the lot? But anyway, the questions that I have, I very much appreciate that site plan control will be possible with this because I believe because of the nature of the mixed use and the number of units. And I just wanted to highlight, and I don't know if it's a question, but I'd like to frame it as a question. The gateway aspect of this location is significant. And so I really hope that in site plan that that is taken into account, because we have had some attractiveness added in to some of the other builds that have been out that way, with getting some trees up close to the highway, not right at the highway, but up close to the highway and that sort of thing. I know that that's a comment. I was hoping to make it a question, but it's not really a question. Just, I'm really grateful that we have site plan. Well, my question would be, who will ultimately agree to the site plan? Will that come back to council, or will that be in a different direction for approval?
Site plans are approved by staff, and council will receive an information report where we can make comments, but the approval lies with the CAO.
Okay, well, then a question I have, which follows up on what Councillor Davinsky said, the snow storage areas, and there are 3 of them. What is the intended surface treatment underneath those areas? Because, for a certain portion of the year, hopefully more than less, those areas will be just open space. So what's the intention for the surface treatment on that part of the property? And again, there on the drawings, there's 2 noted on the west side and 1 on the east side. Is it going to be hard surface or potentially landscaped?
The agent for the applicant.
Yeah, the landscaped area will be grass. It won't be hard surfaced. And then, or whatever isn't grass will be through the site plan discussions with staff will be trees and shrubs and whatever. And if you've ever seen any work that these folks have done, you'll know that landscaping, they're never shy of.
I was sorry, through you, just specific to the snow storage area, though, the intention is that there will be volumes of snow potential dumped there. That doesn't necessarily work for grass. So the intention is to have that grassed.
Dane, do you want to add to that, or? Yeah, the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you. I just want to ask, thank you. This intersection of concession 6 and the CAW road and the highway has been talked about so many times as a potential site for a roundabout And I do believe that coming up at some point, there will be a study. Does this particular configuration on this lot in any way impact the potential for intersection improvements of any kind there, but specific for consideration of a roundabout? Because it has been talked about. I don't, you know, it's coming back again, I'm pretty sure, maybe not our term, but perhaps the next term. So has consideration been given to what potential this has to have that as an opportunity or to impede that opportunity?
The Director of Development Services.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm aware that the town engineering team did review this proposal extensively and provided comments and did not have concerns with the design proposed. I can't say for certain that they specifically turned their minds to whether this would frustrate a roundabout, but we can certainly ensure that that becomes part of our report on the site plan.
Thank you for that, because it has been a topic here a lot of times, and it hasn't been completely removed from conversation. My last comment, or sorry, my last question follows what Councillor Stack was talking about in terms of development charges. I was going to very specifically ask if, you know, what kind of development charges would relate to this, and also what kind of expectation the public could have, the town could have for improvements that would be public access. So there's two parts to that. Would we be expecting and requiring that the developer do the adjacent to the vehicular or the traveled portion of the roadway at concession 6? Would we be expecting the developer to continue along with the you know, path on the side, which is the mixed use path? Question number one. The question about development charges, are they anticipated? And if not, I would respectfully request that we receive very explicit information here at council about what this universal design thing is all about and what specifically this development will include that enables that kind of reduction of development charges. Because my reading and research about universal design is it's pretty much just the standard in building. And so it's something that most builders are doing just automatically. So I would like to know if we are anticipating development charges on this. And if not, I again would respectfully ask that we receive detailed information about why. But so there's three questions or two questions in there. But thank you for the roundabout comment, because I was thinking about that as I looked at the drawing. Thank you.
Any comments, Candace, about the DCs?
Sure. So the calculation of development charges does actually happen at the building permit stage. And so right now we're dealing with the Planning Act application to facilitate, then we will do the site plan control, then it will be building permit stage. So I don't have those calculations. And presumably it will be split between residential and commercial. So those calculations will come later. But it is my general thought or understanding is that the development would be subject to development charges unless they fall into one of the exemptions that are listed in the development charges bylaw. In terms of offsite works, again, we haven't gotten into discussions with the developer on the extent of any offsite works, if any, will be negotiated through the site plan control.
Okay, I think I had Councillor Councillor Mayette.
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Just further to my comments about where the driveway is going to be located. I went back and looked at the beginning, and the property is described as 5094 Highway 21. Is there not a requirement that if the property is located and described as fronting on Highway 21, and it was even described as the front of the building, that the driveway should be onto Highway 21? I mean, you can't have an address on one road and have a driveway in your driveway come off another road, I believe.
Supervisor Development Services.
Yes, sorry, thank you. If need be, we could revise the address depending on the site, but there's no requirement that I'm aware that requires the numbering to be aligned with the driveway. But if I'm wrong, we can change the address so that it's a concession 6 address.
Okay, Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I always get caught up with whether we can ask, make comments or really stick to questions right now. I guess this is still the,
Yeah, I'll be in 1 second after you speak. I'm going to close the public meeting and then we'll take all the comments.
yeah. Okay. Well, I'll ask this question, the traffic study. I did make a comment right at the beginning when I started to speak was about, I want to make comment about the 6th concession entranceway. So I'll make that comment, I guess, later, how I feel about that, and I have some suggestion. But the traffic study through to the planner, Ron, who was that conducted through, Ron? It was the traffic study?
The agent for the applicant.
Paradigm Engineering.
Paradigm?
Yes.
Okay, and I have similar questions about the entrance on concession 6 with Lamont Sports Park and the business park and cars stacking up. It's not a long distance from that entrance to Highway 21. I really like this development. I'll comment on that later too, I guess, how much I like it. And okay, I'll reserve those comments for later, I guess, about the entrance.
Okay, are there any other questions for the planner or the applicant or town staff at this point? Let me just ask quickly to town staff, you have quite a list of you had in this applicant, you had quite a list of questions, comments, concerns that you had submitted to the planner. Were all of those concerns addressed? Have they been addressed at this point?
Thank you for the question, Mayor Charbonneau. The majority of those comments and clarification points have been addressed. One of the items that still remains outstanding is that we did express that it was the town preference for the building to be situated closer to Highway 21. And again, it was indicated that that was the preference of staff. The design did not come back with any changes after that comment was made. But in terms of all the other, making sure that we have the bylaw, the parking and all the other concerns, there are some engineering comments that will be addressed at the site plan control stage. But other than the situation of the building on the property, that's the only thing that would remain outstanding.
Okay, is there anything, other questions at this point? If not, then I'm now going to declare the public meeting to be closed. And I'm going to read the recommendation and then we'll take comments from council. So the resolution is that subject to a review of submissions arising from the public meeting, the council approves zoning bylaw amendment Z-2024-054 for Ray and bylaw 37-2025. Is there a mover and seconder? Councillor Halpin, Councillor Stack. Questions, comments from members? We'll start with Councillor Halpin and then come around.
Thank you, Mayor Charbonneau, and through you. Just a comment on, I don't see why the building couldn't be flipped. Like you have 2 rows of parking against the Highway 21. If you had 1 row of parking and the 2 behind, I don't see how that would affect anything in the plan, and that would have the building closer to the street as desired. My other comment is I'm really happy to see a commercial development with residential, like this mix with the residential on top of it. I think it's an excellent use of density. I think it's an excellent use of land. And, you know, I think this should be the model is what we should, you know, coming up this summer, we're going to be looking at those development charges again. I believe that bylaw expires this summer, so that, you know, we will be looking at that. And to me, that is something that is, you know, is something that we should be pushing for rather than have 1-story plazas, have 3 or 4-story buildings with residential uses on top. So I'm happy to see this development, and I trust that you'll do your very best to do us proud with how it looks on that southern entrance into town. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stack. Oh, sorry, the Vice Mayor, and then Councillor Stack. Sorry, you had your hand up a minute ago. Vice Deputy Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just wanted to commend the developer. Our requirement of 30% landscaping, they're exceeding that to the amount of 34%. And I think that's they're to be commended for that. I think we need to talk enhanced landscaping plan on Highway 21, and you can look up that definition of enhanced landscaping plan. We've heard it before. I think Bruce County Therapy Clinic has done Bruce County Chiropractic and Physiotherapy Clinic has done a great job with their landscaping and as Ideal Supply. And I think this could be a nice gateway into our community for an enhanced landscaping plan at that intersection. To me, it's really a positive development. I like the idea of the continuation of that, right from the intersection up to the Saugeen Rail Trail for the asphalt trail. I think that's a good move. And the landscaping to the north, there's some landscaping at the north as well. I'm just wondering, and Councilor Mayette and just one of the comments I was going to raise when I first spoke was about the entrance, and who am I to argue with Paradigm about the transportation study? I'm assuming they took into consideration Lamont Sports Park and the business park, and the traffic is going to become a lot heavier on concession 6. I'm just wondering, why that entrance can't be 10 meters would make a big difference. If the entranceway was 10 meters to the east, you flip that building and have one row of parking along Highway 21 and the building closer to Highway 21 for setback, and put the 2 rows of parking, the double rows to the east of the building, and move the entranceway 10 meters to the east. That would make that's a significant change for cars stacking up there. I'm wondering if, and again, I'm not a planner, I'm not Paradigm, I'm not a traffic specialist, but something says to me, and a heavy user of concession 6 for Lamont Sports Park, that entrance really does concern me. And I'm just wondering if that can be moved, 10 meters to the east, move that building out towards the highway and put the double row of parking to the east. To me, makes good sense, but again, I'm not a planner here, but I just think that that would make better sense. So I guess I went on too long.
We ran out of space on the internet.
So those would be my comments. I just want to commend the developer. Thank you. Again, I just want to commend the developer. I think that the enhanced landscaping plan along that 160 feet, I calculated out to 160 feet long, enhanced. Don't go cheap on the landscaping. Because I think that could be one special corner and, heading into our community.
Thank you, Councillor Stack, and then Grace.
So I'm probably going to take a slightly different position than Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt, but I'm less fussed about, I think anything, frankly, is an improvement from the rundown sort of garage situation. So I'm happy to see that. The only thing I would sort of ask, and I think I've raised this, but tree away, I think that's great as well. But the one thing I just go back to town staff is and I've raised this issue before, just using this opportunity. I'm really interested to see what our affordability is turning into. So we've approved a lot of complexes of similar scale. I think there's the 3 or 4 that we've approved recently. From what I can tell, many of them they're not fully occupied. So I'd just like to understand whether we're going to do an assessment at some point on where the affordability index is in town, because I'm not sure it's moving the dial. And that's with a variety of concessions we've made. So I'm just curious. I think this is a great idea. There's no reason to not approve it. But from an affordability perspective, I think we need to be keeping our eye out. And then just on a personal level, the buildings all have what I have dubbed the divorced dad aesthetic, the color coding of brown and gray. So if there's any opportunity to just pick any color palette other than that, that would be great. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Grace, and then Councillor Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Most of what I was going to say has been said. I think the importance of the gateway location and making this design special and looking at the Port Elgin toolkit, the design guidelines that are provided and referenced in the report, that's important. I really haven't heard anybody speak specifically about the town staff's request to include street trees in the landscape plan. That's something that the environmental committee recommended. I'd really like to see that follow through as much as possible. The other thing is the trail connection coming from Lamont Sports Park, and the staff requests that that connection be formalized through the development with sidewalks in relation to that link, and I like that idea as well. And also consideration for the property to the east, so enhanced buffering, which it looks like there is with that landscaping strip along there. Hopefully that will be an attractive type of buffering. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll try and be brief. Overall, I'm really happy to see that this development's come forward. I agree with the other speakers that this corner has been long neglected, and we refer to it as Skid Row just because all the skids piling up in the back. But I'm happy to see it. I honestly I understand, and I believe what we're voting on is actually the variances here tonight, right? So the variance of the 27 meters, I can see that because you want your retail facing Highway 21 because you're a Highway 21 frontage. You want the retail to have the parking out front because, you know, if you're going to put a store, a retail store or a commercial out there, the people want to pull up and park out front. They don't want to drive around the back and have to go walk back around the front of the building or enter from the back. And businesses like to see the cars parked out front. You know, when you go by a restaurant and you see no cars in the parking lot, you think, well, that can't be very good. I'm not going to go there. But you see a few cars and then more cars come, right? So I can see why they want to do that. And I think it's a good idea. And then keep the residential parking in the rear. And people can have their privacy when they get out of their vehicles and that, so on and so forth. With regards to the landscaping though, I don't mean to be disagreeable, but once you start putting trees in there, trees cause snow drifts. And snow drifts can come from any direction. So landscaping, certainly grass and some shrubbery, but I wouldn't go with any kind of trees because even small trees turn into big trees and big trees cause big problems. So when it comes to the highway frontage, you don't want to block out your customers from seeing your businesses and trees get in the way. I think what's been done over at the chiropractic is nice. It's a grass with some low junipers and that sort of thing. So those are my comments, and I will be supporting the variances here being requested. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll come to this side and I'll get Councillor Davinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, my comments. I appreciate the development. It's something that's needed no matter where it is, but particularly in this corner. I agree with everybody else's comments too, to move it closer to Highway 21. And if we do, if I'm in the bottom section where the commercial section is, I want access to me off of Highway 21, which is already there. And all we have to do is put in a small driveway. But MTO has said they would rather not. Well, sometimes everybody else has done it. Why can't they do it? And I think if that was the case, then you probably would get a lot of cars in there. I know they're trying to service the people that are living in the building and so on as far as commercial goes. But commercial without access from Highway 21, I don't think there's going to be a lot of customers, potential customers that would make the effort to go onto concession 6 and then go through there and try to get to where I'm going. But if I saw it on Highway 21, I would. So that's still my bugaboo. I don't know if there's anything that can be done about it. And I agree with Councillor Stack. Let's do something different with this development. You've proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that you have good developments throughout the town, but this is coming into Port Elgin. Let's do something with panache and pizzazz and get it done the right way. Okay, so, and I think we have an opportunity here to do it. That's all I have to say.
In my experience, panache and pizzazz can be controversial. The Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, we don't want Vegas. Through you, just a couple of encouragements. Looking at the site plan, thinking about the potential of commercial uses that are unknown at the moment, I think it would be very appropriate for going forward, there be consideration given to sidewalk access on the northerly extension or the northerly end of the property so that people on the sidewalk don't have to go all the way down to, I realize that there's parking there and that sort of thing, but certainly that would, I think, enhance the pedestrian opportunity. Plus also with bike parking situated on the design as it is, a route out to the highway would, kind of zip people on their bikes maybe over to Canadian Tire or, that sort of thing, without having to cross a landscaped area. It's just because there is, I think in the design, a sidewalk there. I just think instead of just showing sidewalk, a sidewalk extension from the street side sidewalk into the property, very close to concession 6, it would be a good idea to consider access in for pedestrians at the other end. I wanted to ask, it's a question, but then there's a comment afterwards. Do we have the potential to collect any cash in lieu related to like parkland or anything for this development? Is that part of the financial possibilities with this?
Candace?
Oh, 1 second, sorry.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Charbonneau. No, typically we would only collect parkland dedication when we're severing, when there's going to be a severance of land.
Okay, then as a follow-up to that, when you look at the dimensions of the property, it's not squared off on every corner. When you get the corner that's at the intersection of concession 6 and the highway, there's an angle across there. So there's a little chunk out that is probably considered road allowance. I don't think that should be forgotten and just expected perhaps that, the town improve that. I would encourage that space, even though it seems to be outside the property boundary, that it be considered, as the site plan gets developed, that it be considered as part of the potential for an attractiveness at that corner. And that, for what it's worth, I would hope that the developer would be expected and be willing, in fact, to take care of that, because it enhances their property too. But there is a bit of a little sort of space there that's outside that property, but it still is very important in terms of the gateway aspect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll just make a comment. So I like the development. It's a nice development. It's a good spot. And as I think Councillor Sack pointed out, it'd be a nice upgrade for that corner and in the gate, the entrance to the community. And I, for one, believe that building more high density residential is, as you do it, helps to bring down the price of housing more in the aggregate. So I think we want to see more of this. The thing I choke on here is that extra 7-meter setback from the highway. And normally, see, I wouldn't worry so much about this site plan at this stage, because all we're talking about is a zoning bylaw on the official plan, but and the site planning comes later. But in this case, we're enabling that setback and essentially making it permanent so that all development, this one and every future development, can be built at that setback from the road on this lot. And it's right at the gateway, right on the highway commercial corridor, where we have said, and we've been told by designers over and over again, that we want to mass the buildings as close to the road as possible. And I think it could be done here. And if we approve this tonight, the way it is, then we will write in stone the ability to set that back. And then it'll be up to the good graces of the developer to decide whether or not they're going to come closer or not. And they may or they may not. If we don't do it tonight, then maybe they would be forced to have another look at it and decide whether or not they could do it. We've heard from staff that it was something they suggested and that it wasn't taken up. I'd like to back the staff up on this. I'd like to defer this, not pass it, and say to the developer, go back and see if you can design something that masses this building closer to the road on Highway 21. It's an important location, and we should attempt to achieve the design guidelines and the toolkit objectives that we set out. This council set those objectives out. And here we're just going to let this go and not just for this development, but for the rest of time, allow buildings to be built almost 30 meters back instead of 20, and 20 is plenty far. To me, I'd rather not approve it with this 27. If they come back and it absolutely can't be done, I guess, but I would say I'd rather not do that tonight. I'd rather say, go back, look at redesigning this to move that building at 7 meters closer to the road or whatever you have to do, have one bay of parking along there and see what you can do. I think that's plenty of parking for those commercial units. It's 16, would be 16 spaces on the front. That'd be plenty of commercial parking spaces on the highway. So there'd be no problem in that regard. I just think it can be done, and I think they should try to do it. I think we should ask them to try to do it. So my preference would be a deferral, but I think if it comes to a vote, I'll vote against it. The Deputy Mayor.
I would make a motion to defer the application to enable consideration of adjustments to the setback from the highway so that it more conforms with our zoning bylaw.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Dubinsky? Any discussion to the deferral? The Vice Deputy Mayor?
Mr. Mayor, I'll support the deferral. I just hope that developers are here, that they've heard also other comments about the enhanced landscaping plan. I know that comes later, but the entranceway, I think they need to take another look.
Well, they could consider those things too as part of a deferral. Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And with regards to the motion to defer, I can appreciate your comments to state that we don't want to set a precedent that becomes the standard. I'm afraid maybe that cat's already out of the bag, because I'm looking at an aerial photograph of the chiropractic clinic, which is right next door. And it's got the exact same layout as what's being proposed here, which is 2 rows of parking, and it's set back. The one next to that, which is the, we used to call the Rolls Royce Plaza, but the plaza next to it is at the 20-meter level, and it's got 1 row of parking, and then people park parallel to that. And I know from going in and out of that plaza from time to time, the single row parking, it becomes a little tricky with people parking there. Now they've got parking in the rear for their commercial purposes, but then they've had to put entrances to their businesses from both sides of the building as well, which adds another complication. So, but going back to what I originally said is that the chiropractic clinic is at that, what appears to be the 27-meter level without measuring it, but it's certainly set back to what's being proposed here today. And honestly, I think it works for that area, and to have the commercial parking on one side of the building and the residential parking on the other side of the building seems to make more sense to me. If I was living in the building, I wouldn't want commercial come and go retail parking between the cars that are parked there, for longer periods of time. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to be supporting the deferral of that. I like it the way it's been proposed.
Understood. Thank you. Further questions or comments to the deferral? Seeing none, all in favor of the deferral? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and opposed? That's carried. The motion is deferred. All right, so now we will move on to our second planning public meeting. Let me switch over to it. Okay. Sorry, I just got here. All right. So next on the agenda is a public meeting for Local Official Plan Amendment L 2023-013 and Zoning Bylaw Amendment Z 2023-050 for Patel, and is a public meeting under the Planning Act. The meeting on this file is now open. The purpose of the public meeting is to learn about the application and to hear from members of the public. First, we will receive a report from planning staff. Then we will hear from the applicant or their agents. Then we will hear from any members of the public. Members of the public are advised that the ability to appeal the decision on this application may be limited if you have not provided comments on the application before the decision is made. Comments may be made verbally before the committee or submitted to staff in writing before the bylaw is passed. After we've heard from the public, the committee will discuss and consider a recommendation on this application. So I will now ask the planner on the file to present the application, and Ms. Steeper has this one. So go ahead.
Thank you. The purpose of the application is to seek a site-specific provision to the highway commercial designation and the highway commercial zone. If approved, the amendments would facilitate a mixed commercial and high-density residential building on the subject lands. The proposed five-story building would consist of a ground floor commercial unit and 27 accessory apartment units on the upper floors. The property is located west of Highway 21, north of Mary Street, within the town of Port Elgin. The site is surrounded by mixed commercial and residential uses. The Bruce County official plan designates the subject lands primary urban communities. The town of Saugeen Shores official plan designates the lands highway commercial. The goals and objectives of both the county and local official plans direct much of the future growth to primary urban communities to support the efficient use of land and infrastructure. Currently, the site is vacant and is partially paved. The applicant is proposing the five-story mixed-use building with a commercial unit and ground floor parking on the main level. 27 residential apartment units will be on the upper floors. The proposal supports the efficient use of land and infrastructure. The applicant is proposing a commercial unit of 160 square meters in size, which is a difference of 140 square meters. This is why a local official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment are required. The predominant use of the land in the highway commercial area is for large format commercial uses, which because of space and parking demand are not compatible with the compact nature of the core areas, which are dependent upon a high degree of access and visibility for vehicular traffic on main roads. In this case, the subject property is constrained in size and would not be able to accommodate a cluster of buildings or large format businesses. The reduced commercial footprint ensures compatibility with the residential units. Smaller commercial units provide for greater integration with the residential uses. Several different commercial units and sizes are available within the PowerLink building, which is directly adjacent to the subject site. The provisions requiring additional lot area and frontage per residential unit were not amended in 2024. This was intended to allow mixed-use proposals to be evaluated through a zoning bylaw amendment to ensure an appropriate development scale for the size of the site. The applicant has provided considerations in the design of the building in order to accommodate the required parking and to facilitate the size of the proposed mixed-use development, allowing relief from the minimum lot area and frontage requirements are appropriate for this project. It would be considered adequate given the proposals considered an infill development on an existing lot of record. The applicant is seeking relief from other provisions of the zoning bylaw, specifically a reduced rear yard setback, increased front yard setback, increased lot coverage, and reduced percentage of landscaped open space in the front yard. The zoning bylaw requires a minimum rear yard setback of 10 meters, whereas the applicant is proposing 3 meters. The applicant is requesting relief for 7 meters. The purpose of the rear setback is to ensure sufficient amenity space, but also to provide for separation between multi-story buildings and adjacent uses. The applicant has attempted to limit the impact of the reduction by only requesting the reduced rear yard setback to the ground floor parking level. The residential use of the building on the upper floors is proposed to maintain a minimum of 10-meter setback. An outdoor terrace is proposed above the parking level in the rear yard for use by the residents in the building. Parking on the surface of the site would be permitted within that distance to the property boundaries. In this instance, the parking spaces are being incorporated within the building itself. The applicant is also proposing a 1.8 meter high privacy fence to provide screening along the property boundary. Given these considerations, it is considered reasonable in nature to allow the requested relief. The zoning bylaw allows for a maximum front yard setback of 20 meters, whereas the applicant is proposing 25 meters. The intent of the maximum front yard setback is to encourage walkability and prevent parking dominating the front of the site. The setback ensures that building and commercial uses are visible and accessible from the street. The applicant has requested relief in order to accommodate 2 rows of parking and a maneuvering aisle between the spaces. A walkway is proposed to be located at the front of the development. The request would facilitate and support the access and parking for the commercial use. The purpose and intent of the maximum front yard setback is being achieved. The applicant is seeking to increase the lot coverage in the highway commercial zone from 35% to 45% for the proposed development. This is an increase of 10%, and considered reasonable, given that an apartment building in the comparable R4 zone is permitted maximum lot coverage of 45%. Lot coverage helps ensure that lot maintains permeable surfaces for drainage and allows for amenity space. In this case, the applicant is proposing an underground stormwater management system and is proposing an outdoor amenity space above the parking. There are also landscape planting strips incorporated into the design. The intent of the lot coverage is being maintained through the development concept design. The applicant is also seeking to reduce the percentage of landscape open space in the front yard. The zoning bylaw requires at least 50% of the required landscaped open space to be located in the front yard. The zoning bylaw requires 30% of the landscape be provided, and the applicant is proposing 40%. The development is exceeding the landscaped open space requirements for the site overall. There is a 3-meter planting strip proposed to be located at the front. The purpose and intent of the landscape open space is being achieved through the proposal. Regarding parking, the applicant is proposing a bicycle and 40 vehicular parking spots. 3 parking spots will be designated accessible. The parking for the commercial use is proposed to be provided on the surface level, and the parking for the residential use is proposed to be contained within the building. The applicant is exceeding parking requirements. No comments received from the public, and this concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we will hear from members of the public, and I'll ask first if the applicant or their agent is present. See the agent for the applicants. We'll ask you to come forward and introduce yourself, please.
This is on. Good evening, Council. Dana Kiefer, Senior Development Planner with Cobide, here on behalf of the applicant. So Julie did a very good job explaining the variances, so I won't go into a whole lot of detail other than to give you some high-level building design ideas. So a total of 27 units is proposed with a 160-meter commercial unit. 22 2-bedroom units are proposed and 5 3-bedroom units are proposed. So the parking garage, which is the subject of the reduced rear yard setback, will be partially sunk into the ground. So that 3-meter setback will apply to a structure that is approximately 2 meters above the ground. And the top of that will be used as a patio for the residents. So the suites themselves will be 11 meters from the property line. So that first floor is about 2 meters out of the ground. The rest of the suites where people actually live are going to meet the rear yard setback. The building proposes to use innovative design elements, including rooftop stormwater management retention and underground stormwater management retention to do more with less land. The outdoor space provided above the parking garage will provide sufficient amenity space for the development. As Ron mentioned, I have stood before your council before, and I know that landscape open space is near and dear to your heart. The bylaw does require 30%. The proposal will meet that across the lot. What the highway commercial zone does is require that 50% of that be located in the front yard. So that is the part of the bylaw that the development cannot meet. They are proposing to have 18% of the overall landscape in the front yard. So that concludes the highlights that I wanted to highlight, but I'm very happy to answer questions from council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak in support of the application or with questions, concerns, or objections? There's nobody in the room. Is there anybody online who wishes to speak to us? The answer to that is no, and I'll ask if there's any written submissions that were not already discussed in the planning report, presentation, or oral submissions. No to that as well. Okay, so then we'll ask if committee members have final questions on the application before I close the public meeting for a discussion. Start with the deputy mayor and then Councillor Grace.
Thank you. One question for clarification, and then another one. The height, there's different numbers in here. So is it 70, the ultimate height of the building? What is that figure? I don't know who should answer that, but perhaps Dana, since she's standing up.
The planner, well, we got, yeah, Ms. Kiefer, if you want to speak to it.
Through you, your worship, we're all planners, so we all answer when you say that.
Which planner shall we
Yeah, which
choose?
letter would you like? I actually don't have the facade in front of me, but I can clarify for council. When we had that discussion, I had referenced the top of the parapet, which is actually not included in the height requirement. So I believe the overall height requirement, Candace, if I'm wrong, is 17 and change? 17.5. But when I wrote my letter, that was the top of the parapet.
Thank you. And I should have perhaps submitted this in advance so someone could be prepared. But since this is the property abuts the PowerLink property, which originally was, I believe, intended to be higher, and they've it's now 3 stories. Will this building be about the same height, even though it seems to have more stories, or will it? Is there a possibility of knowing what the height of the PowerLink building is to do a sort of visual in your mind of how much higher this building will be? Do we know how high the PowerLink building is? And the reason why I ask is that this also kind of relates to the distance back from the highway, because the PowerLink building is situated very close to the sidewalk at the front, and this one is going back further. So I just was wondering about the heights. My other question would be, and I'm glad that Planner Dana is still at the mic. I'm confused about the parking situation. In one place in the report, it talks about that it's underground and then the use of garage, and you've confirmed something for me that a certain part will be underground and then above, but I'm confused about above. So I see it as covered parking. So it's part of it is submerged and then it's covered. And am I correct in assuming that part of that coverage will be open amenity space, but the building where the residential aspects will come out a bit over that and then go up from there? So will some of the residential be on top of the covered parking, or is the covered parking space the entire roof area open amenity space?
Through you, your worship. How do I describe this? I understand your question. I'm trying to think of a good way to describe it. The vast majority of the first floor will be parking, the commercial units at the front. So there will be residential spaces above it, but the parking structure will extend past the residential structure or the end of the units in the rear yard. So there will be a jut out of the back of the building that is parking. And above that will be a rooftop amenity space.
Do we have any sense of the height of the PowerLink building?
I can't say that I do.
Okay, thank you.
Do maybe yes, Candace.
Yes, through you, Mayor Charbonneau, the PowerLink building is 17 meters in height, and this is proposed to be 17.5.
Okay, Councillor Matt. Oh, sorry, Councillor Grace and then Matt. I should write this down so I can remember.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. My first question is, I guess for Dana, you mentioned, I think, that you said that some of the stormwater management is going to be on the rooftop. Is that true? Or did I miss?
Yes.
Did I not understand that?
Nope, that's correct.
We did some research on that in our environmental committee, and it's exciting. How is that going to work? Is it through like a partially green roof, or are you actually doing like a collection vessel?
Through your worship, I unfortunately don't have the details of it, but I'm assuming it will just be a collection portion. So In terms of stormwater management, we have to detain a certain amount in order to match our post-development flows to our pre-development flows, so that will form part of the detention.
Okay, thank you. My other questions involve part of the report, comments from the town about parking underground. And there's a comment about a concern about restricted access for firefighters. And a consideration should be given to a second access point. So I guess a question for somebody. Right now, there's one access point from Goderich Street. Is it possible to get another access point?
The agent for the applicant?
Through you, your worship, it would be challenging because as I mentioned before, the parking structure is going to be partially sunk into the ground. So getting a second access point, especially one that is going to be any type of useful for fire, would be challenging with the current building design.
Thank you. This also is related to the town's comments. There's a comment in here that says, I guess the town should also prevent charging stations and electric vehicles in the parking garage. By prevent, do you mean prohibited? I don't know who that would go to.
Take it to Julie Steeper.
If I may, I believe the intent of that comment was to generally discourage that EV stations in the underground charging stations in the underground parking. In discussion with the applicant's planner, the applicant doesn't intend to have charging stations in the building in the underground parking. So that would address that concern.
And one last question related to that same thing. Will there be sprinklers required in the garage? Is that something the town requires routinely, or is that something that's going to be planned for by the builder?
The agent?
Through you, your worship, that will be subject to the building code. I unfortunately don't have an answer, but I'm not sure if town staff does.
Candace?
Yeah, thank you through you, Mayor Charbonneau. Yeah, it's a standard that the sprinkler system would be required, including in the parking garage.
Okay, Councilor Mayette, next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at the extensive, what looks to me like a septic system, but it's an infiltration system. Is this proposed to be under the entire parking area out back? So that the stormwater, you mentioned stormwater retention. Obviously, we're not going to have a pond. We're not connecting to storm sewers. So there's quite an extensive description of the founder of Plastic Chamber Technology, Stormwater and Septic Solutions with high-tech infiltration galleries. Is that like all going to be underneath the parking garage?
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau, if I may, it's not going to be underneath the parking garage. You will see it delineated. I'm not sure if you guys have access to my report, but it does run down the green space on the north side of the lot and the south side. So
Okay.
it's not usually, ideally, you wouldn't want to put it under the building in case you had to maintain it at all.
Yes.
So it is going to be located on either side of the building.
All right. And just so I get this straight, the building itself with the residential units, which is a 5-story building, is going to be situated towards the front of the lot. And then the back where the parking area is, that's just a covered cement concrete roof, right? With some access from the residential area out onto that, which is a rather long roof, right? Is that what I'm seeing a building out the front and then this big long parking area out the back covered in.
The agent for the applicant or?
Through you, just 1 second, I'm going to grab it.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the drawing on the Kobite drawing.
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau, 9.5 meters. That will be what the parking structure extends past the residential portion of the building.
Oh. Oh, just the back bit where it says outdoor patio?
Through you, yes.
So the rest of it is all building? Okay. All right. So it's gonna be, I think it's similar to what's being proposed right next door, underground parking and residential on top.
Through you, yes. And it's also, I would highlight for council that it is tiered.
And
So
tiered. Yeah.
the facade is tiered, so it's not a straight roof that runs back.
Right. Okay, I think I grasped the concept now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Halpin.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Why don't, like, we're approving these, and I understand that you're talking more just about the use of the land or something, but it'd be so much easier for us to understand this if we saw the facade of the building also, same as the last presentation. And would get around questions about, well, what does this look like and where does this go? And you're asking us to make big decisions here, and I feel like we're kind of hamstrung a bit.
I think it's always a bit of a line that staff walk because right now, because we're considering the zoning bylaw and official plan, it really has more to do with the land use than the elevations of the building. But I think staff have heard tonight and would be wise to consider including these elevations for council and potentially the applicant's planner's report, like Ms. Keeper's report for council's information in future, because ultimately these discussions end up involving discussions about those facades and about those elevations. So particularly with larger developments. So I think it's heard, Councillor Halpin, and I think probably in future we'll get those designs if they're available.
Thank you, Mayor.
Are there further questions with regard to the application? Do you have okay, Councillor, back to Councillor Halpin? Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Has Kobite Engineering had much experience with these underground water storage? I was quite interested in looking at that also, and just wondering if you've used them in different locations before?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you have actually approved developments that have used them. So 570 Johnson has underground storage. Mill Street, 644 Mill Street might have it as well. I'm not 100% sure on that one. I am confident in 570 Johnson. But yes, our office is using them more and more. In particular, they are very handy on these infill sites where we are, working more with what we have and don't have the opportunity to have ponds.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Davinsky.
I must have missed this. Are these units for rent or are they for sale?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the plan is for them at this point, from my understanding, is that they're going to be rentals.
Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the planner. I'm just wondering, the 40%, they talk about the 40%, 30% landscaping open space is our requirement, 40% being proposed. Is it fair to assume that the infiltration gallery, I see proposed landscape area in several spots, but the infiltration gallery, is that all part of the 40% landscape area? So is that part of the 40% calculation?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it will be
Correct.
grass on top of it.
Yeah.
They
yeah,
are underground.
Exactly. And so is it fair to assume, I think I've got this right, the Elgin Place Lodge is immediately to the west, right? And I see the line where they've got proposed berming. And then there would be a 6-foot high fence on top of that berm. Would that be correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that dotted line on the site plan will actually be a swale. So it will be an impression rather than a berm.
Oh, it's an impression. So it's not a raised berm and then a fence like Tim Hortons in Southampton has a berm nice cedar hedge and really nice buffering between the Tim Hortons and the residents. So I mean, I know we're not here to discuss so much site plan tonight, Mr. Mayor, but I think staff should really take that into consideration when we get to that stage of the berming and sheltering the development from Malgan Lodge, because that rear yard setback is going from 10 meters to 3 meters. Is that correct? Is that what we're proposing here? 3 meters, and that's pretty tight up to that building. And so I think we need to do whatever we can when we get to that stage, do whatever we can to make sure that that's properly buffered for the residents there. And I'm sure you'll take that into consideration, right? Okay.
Thank you. Are there further questions before I close the public meeting? I don't see any, so I will now declare the public meeting to be closed. And we'll read the resolution, and the resolution is subject to a review of submissions arising from the public meeting, the council adopt bylaw 38-2025 for local official plan amendment L 2023-013 for Patel, and that it be forwarded to Bruce County for approval, and that council approves zoning bylaw amendment Z 2023-050 for Patel and bylaw 39-2025. As remover and seconder, Councillor Helpin, Councillor Stack, discussion. Start with the deputy mayor, then Helpin, and then Grace.
I just wanted to reiterate what the vice deputy mayor just said about the buffering, because it's a big building. It's a skinny lot, and there's a facility behind which, you know, as it gets more enclosed, whatever we can do to still make that a pleasant experience for those people, that would be good. So I would hope that a fence is a fence, but you know, greenery is in my opinion, greenery that becomes a fence. And using the Tim Hortons example from Southampton is a very good one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Helpin.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Again, I like these developments with the mix of commercial and residential. I think it's a good use of land. I like the kind of innovative features that they have for managing the stormwater and everything like that. And I would just encourage them to, rather than go for a wooden fence or something like that, to go for a greenery to separate the two, you know, which is always good. And yeah, this is a proposal I think I can support.
Thank you, Councillor Grace.
Okay, thank you. My question or comments, I guess, go back to the underground garage. And I spoke with our fire chief today about this. Goes back to a couple of comments in the town report. One is about the concern about access, adequate access to the site. The other one has to do with underground parking, and I'm glad to hear that the applicant has said that they're not putting EV chargers in the underground garage. And I know it's a very difficult thing because EVs and EV chargers, and we want to encourage the use of electric vehicles, and having adequate charging infrastructure is an important part of that. But, and I've read about this in other places, that lithium ion batteries, there's a bad record there in terms of them igniting, sometimes without necessarily being connected to a charger. And that's one of our fire chief's concerns is if that happened, he doesn't even know if he would send his firefighters in. The fires are hotter, they're more dangerous. And so I don't know, I guess the one thing that we can control, because there are no regulations, provincially, there are no regulations on that. did a bunch of research on that, Kent, and that appears to be the case. Is it possible that we can just make sure that the applicant knows that we're trying to do what we can to mitigate the situation in an underground garage? And I don't know if we can go so far as to have a condition. The builder has said we won't. I have no intention of putting EV chargers in the underground garage. Is it possible for us to put a condition, or is that going too far? Jay.
Manager of Development Services.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the discretion on this, this issue. Is that I think that does make sense. If there's two willing parties in the site plan agreement, we can start there. And no commitment, but on the discussion that, you know, if two parties agree to something, that seems where I would start. But it's not appropriate in the zoning is what I'm.
Okay, understood. Further questions, the Deputy Mayor, or comments, I should say?
Just to follow up what Councillor Grace just said, I'm interested in the fire chief's concern being explored a little bit further. We have, to the best of my knowledge, this would be the second development project that we've sort of seen and that is getting close to approval, perhaps, that would have underground parking. The other one, I believe, is, no, this might be the third one, because I think the one that's on the former movie theater site had covered parking, not really underground, but covered. And then the development that's behind the Holiday Inn complex and Staybridge Suites, that one had underground parking to a much greater extent than this, because there's a significant number of residential units back there, and then this one. So and none of them have been constructed yet, so we don't really have any experience. But the question of access is one that when the Staybridge, when the project behind the Staybridge and Holiday Inn complex came up, you know, because it was big underground parking there, there was only one access way in to that whole complex, and there were hundreds of residential units there. And so you know, perhaps it doesn't fit in here, but at some point, perhaps there's a good opportunity for a very fulsome, interesting word, fulsome discussion on underground parking and concerns of the fire department related to safety, because none of them have been built yet, but this, I believe, is the third one that we're talking about. And each time there's been different concerns about access. And so, you know, as one of them gets built, we'll have a real example, but I would appreciate at some point in the future, perhaps a little more discussion about concerns related to, in particular, the fire service, because that's ours. But, you know, there's other emergency services too that this would relate to. But thank you for the opportunity to comment, and I'm glad Councillor Grace reached out and did that. And I also just wanted to acknowledge that thank you, Councillor Mayette, for asking the question slightly differently than I did, so that we got a better visual of what was going to be over the garage or the covered parking, because, you know, the drawing didn't make sense to me either. So I really appreciate that that was further defined and explained. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there further comments at this point? I might just add my thoughts to that discussion about underground parking. I don't want us to get into some kind of moral panic around this business. Like it's not like we're inventing underground parking here, right? I mean, there's underground parking everywhere, right? And it's not a problem. And I'm not aware of a lot of electric vehicles blowing up in them. Let's not forget that we have thousands of gas-powered cars with tanks full of one of the most incendiary fluids in the world, parked in gas in parking garages everywhere. And I don't see a lot of buildings burning down. I just don't want to impose a huge burden, a regulatory burden on these developers around these things, or to try to impose something. If they want to put electric vehicle parking in there and it complies with the code, let them put electric vehicle parking in. Like, to me, we have no expertise in this. Let's not try to impose rules that we're cooking up here on the spot. So that would be my view on that. And also on the question, I just wanted to square the circle on that front yard setback in this case. I think you can see the difference here as compared to this last application we looked at. In this case, we have a very small parking situation out front of this building, which is requiring this extension to the front yard setback. It's not ideal. My preference would still be to see these developments pushed as close to the highway as they can be. I really like PowerLink, frankly, and the way it looks on that corner and the way that works, because I think that really complies closely with what we've designed. But in this case, I can see you have to have a little bit of parking for that commercial use out front. What I don't want to see, and I think we need to think about this for the future, is there's lots to the north of there, which are car dealerships at the moment, but which will one day be redeveloped, quite certainly. And I don't want to see this, the Councillor Mayette pointed out in the last application quite adroitly that in that case, there are other developments where the setbacks have been increased, likely in order to allow for more parking out front. I don't want to see this increased setback here become a precedent for the neighboring developments so that we keep pushing back that standard. And we should have these corridors with these buildings as close to the road as we can be. That will give us the gravitas and the prominence of those entranceways that we want, and it will prevent great big wide open parking lots. That is what you're looking at when you pull into town. I don't think anybody wants to see that. People want to see something different than just a bunch of cars in parking lots when they enter our community. So anyway, I'm okay with this one. It's very small, but I hope it doesn't become something that we see roll out to the north and with much larger developments in the future. So it's something to keep an eye on. Anyway, support the application. So you've heard the resolution. It's been moved and seconded. I'll ask all in favor. That's carried. Okay, so that's the end of our public meetings, and we will move on now to the consent agenda. One item there in the consent agenda. It's written here with the resolution, but I just get consent. Right? So I don't need to read the resolution unless anybody wants to consider it. The consent, the resolution would just be that council approves all items in the consent agenda. Is there a mover and seconder for that resolution? Councillor Stack, Councillor Mayette, all in favor? That's carried. All right, so now we'll move on to item 12, the bylaws. Does anybody want to have any of one of those 4 bylaws considered separately? The item 12.1 for Ray was deferred, so that item will not be considered here. So it's really just items 12.2 through 12.4. I don't see any desire to have any of those considered independently, so I'll read the resolution. Recommendation is that bylaws 38, 39, and 40, 2020. Sorry, Councillor Helpman.
Can we make a comment on the assumption, or just, I guess my question, if someone was watching this, would they even know that we passed this bylaw on the?
They will. I'm about to read it. You'd have to be reading the agenda to know what the bylaws names were.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. So the resolution is that bylaws 38, 39, and 40, 2025 are hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 22nd day of April, 2025. Is there a mover and seconder, the Vice Deputy Mayor and the Deputy Mayor? Any discussion on the bylaws? Councillor Helpman.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. It's just good to see that the assumption of services in Westlink is moving along as that development, continues to grow, adding some well-needed housing. And I just drove through there the other day, and it's just a lovely little development. So it's good to welcome them to the full fold. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the bylaws? If not, all in favor? It's carried. And then we're on to bylaw 41, 2025, which is a confirmatory bylaw, and the resolution is that bylaw 41, 2025, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council of the town of Saugeen Shores, is hereby read, passed, and sealed read a first, second, and third time, but finally passed and sealed this 22nd day of April, 2025. Is there a mover and seconder? Councillor Duhaime, Councillor Davinsky, all in favor? That's carried. And finally, the resolution is that this regular council meeting of April 22nd, 2025, hereby adjourns at 8:23 p.m. Is there a mover and seconder? The Vice Deputy Mayor, Councillor Helpman, all in favor? Council stands adjourned. Have a good evening, everybody.